triggered all sorts of feelings of self-doubt in Ellison. My father, this is his adopted father, he's adopted. My father had told me that it would never amount to anything. I gotta pause there. How many times do you and I see this over and over and over again in these books? This maxim repeats again and again and again. You can always understand the son by the story of his father. The story of the father is embedded in the son. Larry Ellison is one of the most ruthlessly competitive and driven people that have ever walked the face of the earth. He's in his 50s when he's saying this. It clearly will always affect us. My father had told me I would never amount to anything, and now it seemed he might be right. That's going to happen in his early 20s. Oracle almost goes out of business when Ellison is in his 40s, and he'll talk about this later on. I couldn't give up because I couldn't prove my father right. I knew I could earn a living as a programmer, but where was my life going? I wondered if I could ever be disciplined enough to be anything more than a technology piece worker. So he actually gets a job, gets promoted. He has a title for the first time in his life. He's working at this company. He's the vice president. And this was so important because from the outside, from the outside it looks like, oh, these companies must know what they're doing. That is not the view normally from the inside. I had always believed that at the top of these companies, there must be some exceptionally capable people who make the entire technology industry work. Now here I was working near the top of a tech company, and those capable people were nowhere to be found. The senior managers I saw were conformist, bureaucratic, and very reluctant to make decisions. I gradually became convinced that I was better at solving problems and making decisions than they were, or at the very least, I was willing to make a decision and do something while they seemed paralyzed by endless analysis and fear of making the wrong decision. Ellison suddenly began to think that maybe he could run a company, but he wasn't motivated by either a great ambition or the vision to do anything in particular. Having his own company would simply allow him to go on with his life, but with more control over it and with better rewards. This is one of the most important parts of the book. I already mentioned it. It took him a while to figure things out. It took him a while to figure out what he wanted to do and how he wanted to live his life. He was 34 when he started Oracle. Oracle was called Software Development Laboratories, and he did not have any grand ambition for it. He says, my original goal was to build a company doing about $10 million a year in revenue and employing about 50 people. What motivated me was the desire to control my environment so I wouldn't have to do things I didn't want to or spend time with people I didn't enjoy working with. So he convinces two other people that he was working with to start SDL, Software Development Laboratories. They started as just a consulting shop. So they bid on this contract, and they're like, great, this is a great way to make a lot of money. Ellison... He's like, you can make a lot of money, but it's way too much work. So almost immediately, he says, I wanted to get out of the consulting business. Consulting proved to be much more work than I ever imagined. I wanted to go into the software product business. A software product offered the ultimate leverage. Build it once and sell it over and over and over again. So they want to make a product, they just don't know what product to make. And the way they find their very first product, which is going to be this relational database that they're going to name Oracle, is actually very fascinating. They scoured the technical literature about databases for new ideas, and IBM had this research division that was publishing all these papers about this prototype relational database that they were building. And so Larry says, I decided we should use the IBM papers as an architectural blueprint for our new database product. The opportunity was huge. We had a chance to build the world's first commercial relational database. Why? Because no one else was even trying. So I actually read other books. I've read 2 or 3 other books on Ellison. And one of them was just about his love of and his competitive drive for racing sailboats. Here's the crazy thing. He does the exact same thing in that domain too. He is always looking for what other people are not doing and then finding an edge that way. He continues, the other relational database projects were purely research efforts. They were spending no time on overall system performance and reliability, both of which were essential for a successful commercial database product. If we could build a fast and reliable relational database, we could have it made. At the same time, I thought it'd be smart to avoid the very competitive and highly conservative IBM mainframe market. So we decided to build our database for the mini computer market. And he talks about, this is, again, he very clearly knows who he is and has spent a lot of time understanding that, in my opinion. I liked the fact that it was risky. The bigger the apparent risk, the fewer people will try to go there. We would surely lose if we had to face serious competition. But if we were all alone in pursuit of our goal of building the first commercial relational database system, we had a chance to win. This was the first in a pattern of apparently high-risk decisions I made throughout my life at Oracle, but I only ever picked the highest risk approach when I thought it would increase our chance of winning. And he talks about why many people can't do this. Whenever you travel an untraveled path, there is going to be risk. Let's go back to his flair for storytelling, his flair for marketing, his just understanding of humans. The first version of our database was called Oracle version 2. I didn't think anyone would buy version 1 of a database from 5 guys in California. And so the very first customer turned out to be the CIA. And then once he sells it to one government agency, he hits it hard. Ellison had to hit the road and sell. One week I flew to and from Washington, D.C. 3 times. In a little over 6 months' time, we had won several deals: the CIA, Navy Intelligence, Air Force Intelligence, and the NSA. Ellison was working harder than he ever imagined, and it contributed to the breakdown of his second marriage. Again, he doesn't hide who he is. Self-absorption will crush a marriage, and I was completely absorbed by my own ambition. I was totally immersed in crush of his second marriage. Again, he doesn't hide who he is. Self-absorbed. Will crush a marriage, and I was completely absorbed by my own ambition. I was totally immersed in making the business. Succeed. I neglected everything else. I was writing computer programs, writing documentation, answering customer support calls, giving training classes, and sending out marketing literature. The very last thing I would do every evening was stamp a stack of manila envelopes stuffed with a spiral-bound Oracle introductory manual I had written. Everyone and anyone I spoke with on the phone that day would get one. I'd arrive home around midnight most evenings. Nancy eventually got tired of this and left. She was the second wife I managed to drive away. The first left because I refused to work enough. The second left because I worked too much. Both cases were caused by my self-indulgent, without compromise mode of living. So at this time, Oracle is growing really fast. They actually wind up meeting a venture capitalist who works in the very same business. His job is to obviously buy equity. Larry hates selling equity. He refuses to sell equity, and for some reason, this guy's name is Don Lucas. Don Lucas just wanted to help Larry, so even though Larry wouldn't sell him equity, he actually helps arrange a loan for Larry Ellison and the company. And Don has some great insight onto the early days of Oracle. People just didn't believe that the relational model would work. There was a great need to do a very high-level sell and say, hey, this is going to be a thing, and these are the things that you could use it for. I will never forget being with an analyst, and he said that the relational database will never work. It is just a toy. We had to fight that for maybe 10 years. Larry was very good at this. He was like a spiritual leader, an evangelist for relational database model. The technical press at the time was saying that the relational database would never be useful. So again, goes back to Larry's contrarian nature, being very comfortable going against the grain. I also think he's an obviously very special individual. So I'm sitting here thinking, analysts are saying this is just a toy. This is never going to work. The technical press saying it's never going to be useful. What are you doing? For some reason, this quote from Napoleon came to mind that made me think of Larry Ellison at this point. In war, men are nothing. One man is everything. Now, the biggest crisis that Oracle ever has, in 1991, they almost go out of business. It's a combination of massive accounting and sales crisis, aggressive sales practices, premature revenue recognition, overexpansion, and then at the same time, a deteriorating product quality. The sales teams would often book multi-year contracts up front. They would recognize the revenue immediately for software that wouldn't be delivered or paid for months or years, and in many cases never paid for. So this led to what they call phantom revenue. Oracle was literally recording sales that didn't exist. And when they had to restate earnings, their stock price dropped by over 80%. So a huge chunk of this book is Larry, like I said earlier, talking about the incentive structure and the lack of controls in his sales organization. And he has this great analogy when you're building your sales organization that you want farmers, not hunters. The salespeople we hired in Europe were very professional and service-oriented. The European management team's strategy was to build long-term relationships with our customers and do business with them on a regular basis. This European farming strategy was in stark contrast to United States sales organization's hunting strategy. U.S. salespeople tried to sell the largest possible transaction to any given customer and then move on to the next customer and the next deal. It took me until 1991 to figure out that the U.S. hunting strategy was both short-sighted and unsustainable. It took another decade to change the culture of the U.S. sales force from hunters to farmers. Again, just like Jensen we talked last week, Jensen was embarrassed by his performance as CEO of NVIDIA for the first 15 years. Larry Ellison is the same with his performance as CEO of Oracle. He says over and over again, I was incompetent. I didn't know what I was doing. It sounds very much like Jensen. He simply didn't regard himself as competent to concern himself with other things that a CEO is supposed to be responsible for. Ellison's approach was extreme delegation. That's how other people described it. That's not how Larry describes it. He says you could say that, but it's closer to abdication than delegation. Now, one of the most glaring contrasts in this book is, you start out, Larry's young, he wants to kayak and hike, maybe set up a little bit of a company, but not do too much. And then once he has something to lose, he shifts into a completely different gear I don't think he's ever left. So Oracle is going to go public in 1986. The fact that he now had something to lose intensified the demands that he was prepared to make on himself and his company. His goals in life have changed. So this original idea of oracles being a vehicle to provide him with a nice life, he's got a reasonable amount of money and he's got plenty of time to take off, that is gone. That no longer exists. It completely evaporates. In his early 40s, Ellison was willing to say and do whatever was necessary to defeat Oracle's rivals. Again, quoting Napoleon, appetite comes with eating. Larry Ellison's version of that is the Napoleon. Appetite comes.
কথা হলো এই মধ্যে একজন যদি রেজিস্ট্রেশন করে থাকে তাহলে তো আমাদের জানি এটা আরেকটা আরেকটা বড় আমাদের এই 2 মাসের লিগে আমি ফর্ম পেয়েছি 2 মাসের লিগে তারপর আমার একটা দেহার ইচ্ছা ছিল যে একটা মানুষ যদি আমরা ইয়া দিল না ফর্মটা পূরণ করবো না
এগুলো না মানে ইগনোর আগে মেসেজ দিয়ে আউট করে আসছে আমার জায়গা তুমি তো পার্সোনালি নিয়ে যাবে তো আমি কাজে কি
আমি কইছি আমারে কোলে
Comes with eating. Larry Ellison's version of that is the more you win, the more you want to win.
দেখলাম না 4000 হ্যাঁ এই পুরো সব মিলে তো 4000 টাকাই পড়ছে এইটাই ঈদের আগে করতে গেল না ঈদের পরে ঈদের পরে 13 তারিখ কত ডেট
ঈদের পরে 11 তারিখ পর্যন্ত
পরের মাসের 11 তারিখ পাড়া দিব না যে আরেকটা পরের মাসের অ্যাটলিস্ট পরের মাসটা দিলে
বাড়ায় বলতে এখন বাড়িতে পারে আবার নাও পারে তো গত মাস বাড়ায় তো কমপ্লিট যে বাড়ায় না একটা পারে বাড়ায় কিন্তু এবার বাড়ায় বলতে একটু কিলো একটু নেই গ্রুপে কিন্তু জানে যে কত টাকা দিতে
কেউ তো অ্যাপ্লাই এখনো করে নাই কেউ কিন্তু অ্যাপ্লাই করে নাই আমার ভালোই লাগতেছে ভাবছিলাম 11 তারিখ তো পরে 11 তারিখ আর বেশি তাড়াতাড়ি হয়ে যায় না ঈদের পরে দিলি ভালো ঈদের আগে তাড়াতাড়ি হয়ে যাবো জানি না আমার এটা কেউ দেয়ও নেই
কিন্তু আমার তো লসাই নেই কেউ দেয়নি এর মধ্যে যে অনেকে অ্যাকাউন্ট সব করে দেখে তারা ভালো না কেউ করে নাই পরে অফার দিচ্ছে নোটিশ
আর সবাই তো আছে সময় তো আছে ফেরা নেই চাইয়া ওই যে ফর্মটা দিছে না কেমনে কেমনে রেজিস্ট্রেশন করতে কইছে এটা কইছে না ফর্মে পরীক্ষা কি ঈদের পরেই নাকি
আরে না জুলাই কি হবে না এই করবা এর পর এসএসসি শেষ হওয়ার